reportedly they're standing in line for 45 minutes to relieve themselves. Yeah, that'd make me a tad grumpy. And so this is to expect them to operate under combat conditions and that kind of, when they're faced with that kind of physical discomfort. Look, this deployment, massive deployment of combat air assets, accompanied by what I'll call is a paltry deployment of naval assets. And let's not kid ourselves. When we conducted Operation Rough Rider a year ago in March in Yemen in the Red Sea, we had 2 aircraft carriers there with 5 other support ships. Until the Gerald Ford was limping into the Mediterranean, you only had 1 aircraft carrier with 3 support ships, and it was staying 1,000 miles offshore because it was afraid of getting blown up. We actually learned why all of this was being done yesterday, or from the day before, in that interview that Steve Witkoff did with Laura Trump on Fox News, in which he was saying, God, why aren't these Iranians capitulating? We've shown up with all this military force. It turns out there was no plan for attack. And I missed the signal. I should have talked about it earlier. But you're not going to have an attack on Iran until you start seeing the embassies getting rid of non-essential personnel and or closing. We've only seen that in Lebanon right now. But Baghdad's still intact, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, Doha, in Dubai, the United Arab, none of those have been drawn down. So there's not an attack imminent yet. The second thing is the lack of NOTAMs, what are called notices for air missions. That's not happening. So this was really intended as a show of force to try to coerce the Iranians into giving up, because the United States has been believing its own lies about what the conditions are in Iran. They really believed that the government was very fragile, could be easily pushed over, knocked over. And that's because they were relying upon information that's being generated from a public opinion poll that was paid for by the U.S. government with CIA backing. Okay? So we pay to lie to ourselves, and then we believe our own lies. But the reality is otherwise. So until we've moved all these air assets, but here's the other thing I don't get. And we've got 30% of the entire fleet of F-35s that are in the Air Force inventory. There are about 21 squadrons. 7 of those squadrons have been deployed. They're deployed at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan and at Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia. Do you know offhand what the distance is from Prince Sultan Airport to Tehran? That's 900 miles. Do you know what the combat radius of the F-35 is? The F-30 combat radius means how far out can you fly before you have to turn around and come back? And the answer to that is 300 miles. 300 miles out, 300 miles back. 600-mile combat radius. I'm not great at math, but if I'm at Prince Sultan and I'm going to bomb Tehran and it's 900 miles away and my plane can only go 300 miles in that direction, how the hell do I go the other 600 miles? It doesn't make sense. I mean, we're being fed such a line of bullshit about, we're going to go in and suppress enemy air defense. How are we going to do that? Well, normally what you do is you take a tanker that would refuel those planes. You're going to tell me we're going to put a KC-135 tanker over the territory of Iran, who actually now has upgraded air defense systems courtesy of the Chinese and the Russians? What sort of drugs are you doing? So, this is why you saw Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he's having his subordinates leak to both the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal saying, "Oh no, this is highly risky. You probably shouldn't do it. That you're going to have casualties." All he's doing is covering his ass because he knows that Trump is going to order it to be done, and he's going to be able to come out and say, "I told him not to do it. He didn't listen to me. See, I was on the record. I told him not to do it," because he's just saying he recognizes he can't stop Trump. We're locked in the 20th century and have refused to understand that we're in the 21st century. So let's look at a couple of the technological changes. First, I want to point out that the Chinese reportedly have given and deployed in Iran a radar that's described as a 3D radar detecting stealth aircraft. Its capability is, from where it is placed, it can see out 420 miles. So let's say that you put it at 100 miles from the coast. And so it's now looking 320 miles out past the western border of Iran. So it will see all of those F-35s coming and well in advance and be able to go after them. The same thing can be said if it's put on the southern coast. It would see a ship approaching within 300 miles. Now, interestingly, the United States is reportedly, they're keeping that Lincoln Carrier Strike Group 1,000 miles offshore because of fear of the hypersonic missiles. What we're witnessing now is the end of a weapon system. The aircraft carrier was a great weapon system back in World War II, because at that time we didn't have in place a way to refuel aircraft in midair, and the only way to get these planes was from one point to another is either have them island hop and or put them on board a ship and fly them off the ship. But now with the advent of hypersonic missiles, which the Chinese have, the Iranians have, the Russians have, the United States doesn't have any note. They've been unable to develop that technology, because it's not just that it travels above Mach 6, but that it is also maneuverable. Yes, U.S. has failed to accomplish that. But what it has done, it's now made these aircraft carriers completely irrelevant. That they are big, fat targets, nothing more. And let's just look tactically how were they going to be used? Well, if the Gerald Ford is in the Mediterranean, it can't be used to attack targets in Iran. Sorry. All it can do is try to provide air defense against inbound missiles and or drones. But the Abraham Lincoln, it's got a contingent of Tomahawk cruise missiles scattered among the destroyers that are its screening fleet. Okay, let's sorry to do this as math class, but hi, Danny Haifong, math for the modern age. If you're 1,000 miles offshore and you've got Tomahawk cruise missiles whose maximum range is 1,000 miles, how much damage can you do in Iran? Little, if any. So that means you got to bring those ships in closer to shore. And then once they're closer to shore, then you can extend the range. But maximum, they can really go about 950 miles inland, and that doesn't even get you to Tehran from the southern coast. So not all of the prime targets, both nuclear, ballistic missile, are on the coastal areas. They're in the interior, really beyond the reach of all these weapon systems we've said. So that's what I say. This doesn't make. Does this look like this was a planned operation to you? No. This is. This reminds me of that scene from the movie The Professional that had Jean Reno in it, and Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman's a corrupt cop, and his guys get all shot up by John Reno, who's his professional hitman, and he comes out and he says, "Call the station. Who do we want to bring?" "Everybody," he yells. Bring them all. That's Trump's strategy. Bring every air asset we have. How are we going to use it? Oh, we'll figure that out once we get there. Like I said, Please explain to me how you employ an F-35 to attack a target that's 900 miles inside, or let's say it's 400 miles inside Iran, when your closest air base that you is 900 miles away. Just if give me an explanation, brief me on how that operation is going to be run. It can't be done.
Regime change is impossible. I'm going to say impossible. It's not that it's unlikely. It's not that it'll be difficult. It's impossible. Why? Because the Islamic Republic of Iran and the support for the government, the supreme leader, it's the overwhelming majority of the country. Okay, so any attack on the country is going to galvanize the country. I know that myself because I was at the National Day March and had the biggest turnout that anybody could remember because Iran was under threat. So the Iranians respond by with solidarity and galvanizing if they're threatened. That's just a fact. So if the United States decide to escalate, it's not that they're going to achieve regime change or weaken the regime. It's going to be they're going to strengthen the resolve and the solidarity of the Iranian people and strengthen the quote regime. That's the outcome that's going to happen. There is no zero chance of regime change. Zero chance. What they're going to do is create much stronger resilience, and they're very proud of their government. They're very proud of what they've achieved, even in the face of sanctions, even in the face of all the attacks by Israel and the U.S. and the assassinations of their generals, their nuclear scientists. They're not going to throw it away because of a few threats or even some attacks on infrastructure or assassination of even their highest political leadership. They're not going to throw away the revolution. It's a republic. It's a revolutionary government. It's in the name. Islamic Republic of Iran. Every single position is democratically elected through the entire system, from federal or national down to local, and even the supreme leader is selected by a special council. But you put that off to the side for a moment. I really don't think anybody in Washington really understands or has read the Cliff Notes on Iran, because I listen to them all the time, and I've not heard anything coming from anybody in Washington that even remotely resembles reality in Iran in terms of like what makes their political economy tick. I've yet to hear it. So this is a high level of ignorance, and they're all marinated in their own propaganda, and they don't realize Iran's ready to sacrifice to preserve their sovereignty. The U.S. is not even willing to sacrifice one soldier because the political cost that would incur for the Trump administration, or one battleship or one aircraft carrier against Iran. So we'll see what Trump does, but it doesn't look like there's a coherent strategy by Trump. He's really relying on the capitulation of the Iranians. And the more, and I agree with with Larry's opening statement, the more data points that come in, it does seem like this is the strategy. It's hard to deny this now. So where do we go from here? Is it going to be a lashing out at some act of desperation to save face, some kind of vanity project to save the face of Lindsey, to save the pasty, oily, sweaty brow of Lindsey Graham?
June 13th, all of a sudden, a surprise attack out of the blue, and the murder of men, women, and children by Israel with the help of the United States, and then the United States helping carry out further attacks. That had the same effect in Iran. That's exactly what Patrick was talking about. And all of a sudden, they came together in a way they never had before. And I got reinforcement. It's anecdotal evidence, but I think it's solid anecdotal evidence from Nima. Nima Al-Rashid. Nima just went back after a 12-year absence. He hadn't been back to Iran in 12 years, and he just spent a month and a half there. And he was blown away in a positive way by the unity, how they'd come together. Exactly what what Patrick said. So it's just, Patrick is not some tool of the Ayatollah. He's not being paid to pander. He's given good, honest reporting as is his hallmark. The upgrade across the board in both the radar, And I can't emphasize the importance of that radar system, because let's again, that let's take this scenario of flying from Al Udeid, or flying from Prince Sultan to bomb a critical target outside of Tehran. So you're looking at a 900-mile trip. The F-35 can go 300 miles, so they're still 600 miles away. They'd have to be air refueled to be able to go another 300 miles. So they're 300 miles from Tehran, and at that point, they could fire what's called a JASSM, a Joint Air Surface Strike Missile, and that has a range of about 250 miles that still falls short. Well, that radar that the Chinese provide, they'll detect that plane when it's within, when it's within 600 miles, or it'll be 320 miles out from the shore. So that radar is important for an early warning. They didn't have that in June. What they call SEAD, suppression of enemy air defense, SEAD. You can't, if you're going to deal with the military, you got to learn how to talk in acronyms. The SEAD was carried out not by aircraft that flew into Iranian airspace, but by units on the ground that were taking out specific sites. And that created some damage. And I'm basing that, Alistair Crook has reported at no time did any jets fly over deep into the interior of Iran during that 12-day war. So this is where the Chinese have now given the Iranians an advantage there. And with the Russians providing S-300, S-400 air defense systems that are now integrated into that radar, and that radar is integrated into satellites, Iran now has a capability that I think maybe General Kane and at least the intel analysts understand, but at least the military knows the potential for damage that Iran can do. And so this is where what we've seen with China and Russia on this is, it's a game changer, because notice they signed a trilateral security agreement on January 29th. You think that was just a coincidence? That comes after, two and a half weeks after the failed attempt to launch a color revolution.
CIA's assets and knowledge on the ground is probably not great in Iran. Maybe it was before. I had the distinct pleasure as a U.S. taxpayer to inspect the CIA skiff rooms at the former U.S. Embassy in Tehran, which they've rebranded to the Den of Espionage. So the Iranians are the master trollers, masters of memes. And so I managed to see all the shredded documents all put back together. If they had internet back then, they would have all been dumped online like the Epstein files. But so I think that I think personally it's a little bit wishful thinking to think that keeping sanctions on and strangling the country and continuously threatening Iran is going to promote regime change at this point. So on the military side, back to that point, I did get the distinct, and I did inquire a lot about China and Russia assistance there, and it didn't seem like they were desperate, or they're prepared to basically fight on their own and go it alone. Obviously, any assistance that they get, I'm sure it's welcome, provided they can integrate it into the systems they have. But Iran has a bona fide space program. They have multi-stage rockets. I saw a demonstration of their satellite painting targets around the Persian Gulf. They have their own proprietary algorithms. They have their own proprietary GPS equivalents, which they can also interface with the Chinese Baidu systems as well. They're very advanced in terms of communications and jamming and intercept electronic warfare. I saw the U.S. drone. I ran my hands over the wing of the U.S. drone that was downed, I believe, under Barack Obama's administration in mint condition. They intercepted the uplink, and captured it, and then took control of the U.S. drone. They've done that twice. So Obama asked. They got a call from Obama after that, saying, "Can we have that back, please?" And that was kind of a joke on the Iranian end. But so to think that they are capable in terms of drones and various types of drones. They have all sorts of different versions of Shahed drones, many different versions of cruise missiles, the Pave cruise missile. They have something equivalent to a U.S. Tomahawk. And in terms of missiles, they have such a wide array. And again, this is coordinated with proprietary satellite capabilities as well. And so they have basically everything they need in their array to defend themselves. And it's so interesting that Iran never invested a lot in manned fighter jets, having a massive fleet of manned fighters. They made that decision many, many years ago to put their limited resources because of sanctions into something more practical. And so they decided they're going to go all in on drones and missiles and also air defense. And I think this investment and this foresight on the part of the Iranians, I think it's been a good strategy considering the limited resources they have. And so much so, if you think about it, the British made a statement. How true it is remains to be seen, but that they won't allow the facilities in Diego Garcia to be used to launch an attack on Iran. Why? Because they know full well, the British know that Iran have the capability in terms of intermediate range missiles to hit those facilities if they're being implicated in a war of aggression against them. So the British know this. This is why they've issued that statement. And it's not only because of Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands, it's because of Cyprus, because Cyprus will be absolutely pivotal. The U.S. and the British bases there, RAF Akrotiri, that will be pivotal for providing a safe haven for Israeli F-35s should Nevatim and other facilities come under attack. It's also an escape hatch for the Israeli political elites as well. And that's going to be on the table. Article 5 doesn't mean anything NATO-wise. Cyprus is a NATO country. If Iran decides to attack Cyprus, it's neither here nor there because the U.S. has already launched an unprovoked war of choice against Iran. So to think that there's going to be some Article 5 case and the entirety of NATO is going to pile in on Iran, I don't think that's going to happen because, again, to my initial point, U.S. this is all instigated by the United States and Israel. They are the instigators in this conflict. This is a, quote, war of choice. This is an unprovoked, undeclared war of aggression. It's in violation of every single international law and convention, and it's against the U.S. It's against U.S. law as well. So Cyprus will become a collateral damage if they decide to go forward. And the last thing I'll say, that there's a huge risk the longer our U.S. naval assets are loitering, the higher there's a risk of a false flag attack. That is not a hyperbolic statement. We're talking about Israel. They have form in this regard. They have carried out false flags before against the United States, against naval assets during a major conflict in order to blame it on another country. In this case, they'll try to blame it on Iran. In 1967, with the U.S. Liberty, they tried to blame it on Egypt. They will do Israel if they're desperate enough and Trump's not moving quick enough. Let me tell you, that's a huge risk, and I would not discount that. That is not conspiratorial at all. You're looking at an existential regime in Tel Aviv that basically their entire existence, the state of Israel's existence in its current iteration, relies on this war happening and the U.S. doing all the heavy lifting for it. So I just wanted to put that out there as a point that people need to consider.
Well, let's be clear that the presence of Russian and Chinese naval assets in that area, that was pre-planned, going back 12, 18 months. This is the three countries have conducted annual joint naval military exercises since February, March of 2019. So this was actually the 8th time that they've done this. So that shouldn't be a surprise, but it took on added importance because of what the United States was trying to do in the region. Until I'd say until January 29th, with the signing of that trilateral security agreement, the prospects for actual Russian and Chinese intervention militarily on behalf of Iran was pretty low. I'd say it's gone up substantially. There's a growing recognition that the United States is out of control. We've openly said we do not respect international law, and as such, we're not going to abide by it. Then I think the Chinese and Russians are finally going, okay, yeah, apparently they mean that. Previously, people keep forgetting that in 2015, when the JCPOA was negotiated and concluded, Russia and China at that time were willing to cooperate with the West in imposing economic sanctions on Iran. That's gone. That's done now. So that's why I say right now, Iran is the strongest it's ever been militarily, and it's starting to come out of the darkness of the economic jail that it's been in for the last, 25 years. So this is the United States doesn't have a clear strategy. Trump went all in, betting that he could intimidate Iran, not properly understanding the influence of Russia and China, and now he's left himself with he either has to back down and admit the weakness of the United States, which frankly is what he should do, but he's not going to do that. He's been toying with this idea of, quote, limited strikes. Iran doesn't care whether it's limited or broad-based. If you strike Iran, they're going to punch back, and they're not going to stop until they effectively force the United States to surrender. Now think about that, because the United States thinks we're the ones who are going to be calling the shots. What happens to us when our air defense systems, the Patriot missile batteries, run out of missiles and we don't have any more to supply them? Not that they're going to be that effective anyway. What do we do when the defense missile systems on board the destroyers are out and there is nothing left to resupply? What do we do? We're not about to send troops. It took us close to a year to mobilize and move forces into Saudi Arabia and Kuwait that were used to invade Iraq back in 2003. We no longer live in an era where we've got the luxury of moving troops on troop transport ships and airplanes without the Russians and Chinese monitoring every step of it. So, like I said, the world has fundamentally changed, but the United States is still playing by rules that are more in line with 20th century capabilities, haven't caught up to the 21st century.
It's on that front, just that China's deployment of signals and communications ship, those types of vessels. I mean, if the U.S. is going into operational mode, then they're exposing a lot of their electronic and military profile by having Russia and China present in the near vicinity. I mean, that's also, I think, a strategic liability for the U.S. I mean, have they thought these things through? Because all these things do matter. So that's just one example there. And to Larry's point, Iran has the volume of drones to overwhelm any U.S. ships and empty out their arsenal and their supplies in a very short space of time. And then they can follow up with a second wave of cruise missiles. Just to give you an idea, for the U.S. to produce one Tomahawk cruise missile, it costs between $1 and $2 million U.S. dollars each. The equivalent cruise missile for the Iranians to produce is by orders of magnitude less, probably something along the cost of a Ferrari, or maybe $50,000 or something like that. It's literally a fraction of the cost that comparably it performs the same function. So this is Iran in their home, on their home turf. They have huge advantages in terms of resourcing, strategic depth, being able to deploy, being able to maneuver and reposition. The United States the United States has overwhelming firepower. There's no doubt about that. But to think that they're going to do this and carry this out and remain unscathed through the process, I don't think that's a reasonable assumption on the American part. Maybe you starting to see some military people that are articulating that. In terms of the other countries that have also expressed concern about this, Pakistan being extremely important in this regard. So whether Pakistan and to what degree they could assist Iran, they can assist them on a number of fronts. So in terms of intelligence, in terms of signals intelligence, lots of different things. So that's another asset for Iran. On the other side, Afghanistan is regarded as a hostile country now for Iran, and Azerbaijan is flirting, with disaster by playing this role that they've allowed themselves to be co-opted into by the U.S. and Israel, as we saw in the previous attacks, and that's ultimately a destabilizing factor potentially for the region. So that means Russia is very interested in the outcome of this particular situation, and certainly this isn't something that Russia is going to be very happy about, having Azerbaijan become a militarized tool of the United States and its allies. So there are a lot of unanswered questions, but I think some of those unanswered questions are going to get answered even through this process of posturing and threats by the United States. And I think ultimately this is going to change the orientation of the Gulf countries for the most part, not necessarily in favor of Iran, but more skeptical and more guarded against Israel and the United States. And the last thing I will say is that there's no way the United States and Israel are going to be able to contain counterstrikes by Yemen, by Ansar Allah, if this thing escalates. There's all sorts of things that the Yemenis can throw at Israel and also throw at U.S. targets. And the U.S. already declared war against Yemen, so Yemen reserves the right to retaliate at any time infinitum against the United States for what they've done to Yemen over the last 12 months. So there's that, plus the Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq as an example. And also we can't discount Hezbollah. If this escalates and Israel becomes involved, then invariably it's possible that Hezbollah could become involved as well, as they have nothing to lose, and they could provide an irritant for Israel. And the defense of Israel is very delicate, and it relies on total coordination with the United States on every single conceivable level. So it's a delicate balance that the U.S. and Israel are trying to orchestrate here.
Yeah, no, there's just a gross, Patrick said it best earlier, the gross ignorance in the policymaking circles about Iran, all predicated on a number of assumptions that have basically been, we've created ourselves, a narrative that is not based in reality. Like, as I pointed it out, the big lie about Iran being the major sponsor of terrorism. In fact, Danny, what I appreciate, I published on Countercurrents yesterday. I've got a new video out, just me explaining what the three big lies are about Iran. Number one, that they're the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. Absolutely not true. That Hamas and Hezbollah are major actors on the terrorist front. Not true. And third, that the majority of the Iranian population wants to get rid of the Islamic Republic. Not true. But we keep telling those lies to ourselves.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, we make policy choices that ultimately, when all is said and done, is going to damage us severely and hurt us.
There's not, they can't make that clear case against Iran. And as Larry rightly pointed out, the lies that underpin the whole reason for demonizing Iran, that Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror in the world, is just complete and total BS. And they're not. I can't see where they are sponsoring any terror in the world. The United States sponsors the MEK, which is a terrorist group, which is deployed against Iran. Okay, they're based in Albania. That's a U.S.-backed terrorist organization. The United States has been caught trafficking weapons to Al-Qaeda en masse in Syria and in Iraq, and caches magically appearing into the hands of ISIS. And the list goes on and on. I don't know where we can stop listing all of these other insurgent and terrorist groups. So the U.S. is the number one state sponsor of terror on the planet, on this planet. So it is financed in the past by the Gulf states. The U.S. procures the weapons. They direct the strategy. Israel is also involved in the strategy room for the deployment of these forces. Syria is obviously the greatest example of this. But what our governments do in the West, in the U.S. and Britain and their allies, and Israel at the behest of the Israel lobby, by the way, because that's the major factor in terms of accelerating the, quote, proscription of terrorist groups. So anybody that opposes Israel, as if you haven't noticed, gets, quote, proscribed as a terrorist organization in the West. So therefore, it cuts off any chance of political dialogue. They label the political wing of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is in the government, as terrorist, and same with Hamas. So that you not only can't have dialogue, not only is negotiations difficult, but showing any sympathy or any sort of opening up any political dialogue could get you as a diplomat or some kind of international peace negotiator or various other organizations, stakeholder organizations. It keeps them away from these people, so isolates them. So this is a tactic. So an armed liberation struggle, as recognized by the United Nations under international law, of which every country, especially countries and people under occupations, have a right to, and that includes those in Palestine and Gaza and also in South Lebanon, okay, that there is armed liberation struggle or a well-regulated militia to defend your borders, and to South Lebanon's getting carpet bombed by the Israelis, and there's no condemnation from the international community because they've already done the prerequisite at the behest of the Israel lobby in the UK, in Europe, and in the US and Canada and Australia, across the European Anglosphere, of labeling them terrorist. Therefore, you don't need to advocate for the people who are getting bombed in South Lebanon or Gaza or anywhere else where they extend this. That's such an important part of this whole picture, because that's how these things are able to persist. And it's done so through legalese. It's done so through our courts and through statutory instruments from our various governments. And Israel is the driving force. The Israeli lobby in the West is the driving force behind all of those, quote, proscriptions. So, and this is I can't underline what a problem this is. And it gives Israel license to kill en masse, period. That's the end result. The end result is that.